Christina. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. So, yep, as Christina said, I'm going to be talking about coding like it's 1999. If you guys want, there's a link to my slides here. I'll just move this way a little bit. Yeah. So you can follow along if you'd like. It's a bit longer version of this talk, but. All right, so very quickly, who am I? I'm Jen. I'm a front-end developer for a company called Mixmax. We do really awesome stuff with emails, so if you have some time, check us out. But actually, before that, I used to be a civil engineer. I worked in the industry for about 5 years, and I got very bored with the slow pace of the projects. And so I thought, what industry do I want to be in that's fast-paced, always moving? And I decided I wanted to be in tech. So I started in tech working as a community specialist at a startup, AKA I was doing customer support for a company that had been around for about 10 years. And I totally hated it. And so I started to teach myself to code. I would go to hackathons, I would go to hack nights, I just started working on a ton of my own projects. And eventually that led to success. And I landed my first job as a web developer for a company called Hotpads. Yep. So here we go. It's my first web development job, and I'm like, oh, my first assignment is to redesign our emails and make them mobile friendly. I'm like, piece of cake, no problem. Wrong. I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. But fortunately, I'm here to share all of my mistakes and strategies with you. And so my story is that emails are evil. I'll talk a little bit about design, a bit about code, and then I'll give you a bunch of references and things that I found along the way. So very quickly, some design. So since the first email I had to redesign was our welcome email, I basically started by doing research. I signed up for a bunch of different services. I checked and scoured my email for welcome emails from other companies just to get a sense of what people were doing with their welcome emails. So my favorite email was one by Indiegogo. I thought it was really great. So the first thing I noticed about Indiegogo's email is there's like a big top anchored logo, which I guess you guys can't see there. Okay, cool. So the first thing I see is a big top anchored logo, so you know exactly where that email is coming from, which is awesome. Indiegogo is really lucky because they have a lot of really beautiful image content, which is really compelling. Another thing I noticed about it was all of their calls to action are this bright magenta. So you'll see links to their different campaigns and then a huge button that says read more. And that's just very consistent throughout their email. So as you scan it, you probably see images and then you see a big button. And I really liked that about this email. I also liked that their social media are these big, nice buttons that also stand out, but also at the bottom they have text, and that's really great for accessibility. So people who maybe can't see those images can click on the links below. And the last thing I noticed was that they have the unsubscribe and ability to update your subscription preferences, which is something that you want to have, I think, in a welcome email immediately, because you don't want to piss people off, I think. So let me go back to my slides now. All right. So again, the takeaways that I got from my research was whether to use text or not, most of the emails I saw used many images, and it's just general thought that images are more compelling. So we used a lot of images in our emails on Hotpads. Another thing is the logo. It's great to have it top anchored just so people know immediately where those emails are coming from. They're not like, oh, who's this email from? It's just from a stranger, I'm just gonna delete it. So you'll know right away. And then also just having a max width of your email, just to make sure that people, don't have to read all the way across the page, and so that your email doesn't run off the screen. So a disclaimer about those takeaways is they're not going to work for everybody. I've heard instances of emails working better with text instead of images. So my recommendation is just to A/B test the hell out of your emails. All right, after a bit of my research, I started to do an assessment of our emails at Hotpads. So I was like, what am I working with? And then I was like, oh my God. So with our emails, the first thing I noticed, of course, is our logo. And I'm like, why is it in the middle of the email? I have no idea. Another thing I noticed is the weird kind of spacing and margins between all of the text. I couldn't figure out why it wasn't consistent. I also thought it was strange that right in the middle of the email, there's a line. So you think the email is going to end because there's a closing, but no, it just keeps going. And then, of course, there's no way to unsubscribe or update subscription preferences, because if I saw this, I would be like, I don't want any more of your emails. So I was like, Doge. It's like, oh, wow. Just wow. All right, so finally, after I figured out what I was working with and what I wanted to make, I decided to figure out what to plan to make. So the first two things I had were these goals of bringing consistency to our emails, because all of the emails at Hotpad were totally different. They all looked strange. They all had, the logo in different places. Some had images, some didn't. It was a bit of a mess. And so I thought it would be great to have some consistency, and therefore that would bring some brand awareness, because just like having consistent email coming through, like a similar template coming through, lets people know what your brand is, and they recognize it. So in the planning, I found out that there are a ton of pre-made templates that I could work with, and there were tons. They were really great. They were very effective, and I'll mention a bit of them later. I didn't actually use any of them, and the reason being, just for me, it was my first project as a developer. I really wanted to spend the time to learn, and I just had a lot of time. These emails had existed for, sometimes somewhere between 5 and 10 years, so it's like, I think I have a bit of time to spend, working on this. So then I started sketching. If there's anything that I've learned from UX design, it's that sketching can be super helpful. So this is one of our emails, and you'll see I just sketched it 5 different times, and of course ended up using the last version of the sketching. And if you're quick in Photoshop, it can be really helpful too, to just do a quick mock-up and just get an idea for when you place your email into code. So this is actually an early mock-up I did of our welcome email. Another thing I wanted to plan for also were our images. So I'd heard a number before of minimum touchable area of 44 pixels by 44 pixels, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. But then I found out that that number is actually from the Human Interface Guidelines for the very first iPhone, and those guidelines don't actually exist anymore. So I found these other 2 articles, which are really great. They talk about minimum touchable areas for different devices. So what I recommend doing is getting a sense of what your users, what devices your users have, and then just take an average of that. And that'll give you a better sense of the minimum touchables areas that you'll need personally or for your company's project. So here's my template. I guess it's cut off a bit at the bottom, but that's okay. So I did a full redesign of this, and of course you'll see the top anchored logo that I'd mentioned earlier. It's got a max width of 600 pixels. I think it's way more organized. I've got more icons, at least for downloading mobile, icons for social media, and then also included the text links for accessibility. It really helps also to have links at the end of sentences, so I tried to do that throughout. And all of the links say exactly what you're going to be doing. So they're not obscure links that just say here or click here for blank. So I like to say that it's an aesthetic that Prince would approve of. And just for reference, these are the 2 emails. So you see mine is a bit longer, but I think it's much more visually interesting. The other thing I did was with the bottom, so our website used to have this footer with the buildings at the very bottom. And so I just mimicked that to just give users a sense of consistency between the website and the emails. So that's design. Now I'm going to move on to code and talk about some tips and tricks. So my template actually that I created for Hotpad is available on GitHub if you guys want to check it out later. And a lot of people are like, why template? Well, I think it's really helpful so that you don't repeat yourself. You can keep your code dry, and a little bit of abstraction just goes a very long way. So you'll see in these two emails listings for apartments, and that's basically just one chunk of code that I just keep repeating throughout all of our emails. And it's really great to not have to rewrite it over and over again. And again, that consistency, so you'll see like very similar template, very similar imagery throughout the emails, and so people can get a sense of where those emails are coming from again. All right, some things I learned before I started coding my emails. Tables are coming. So Mozilla Developers Network says, note, prior to the creation of CSS, HTML table elements were often used as a method for page layout. This usage has been discouraged since HTML4, and the table element should not be used for layout purposes. Emails say lol to that. You've got to use tables. And tables are super important. So I found out recently that by not adding an outer table, your code just kind of disappears in Apple Mail and Outlook 2011. It's just gone. Another thing I learned was that tables do not display as inline or block. They display as table. So you want to have them displayed as block, otherwise Chrome will ignore your max width. Another thing I knew that was coming were inline styles. You totally need them, unfortunately, because Gmail doesn't support a style tag in the head, Outlook.com doesn't support link in the head, and just tons of clients don't support tons of different CSS styles. So you can check out this Campaign Monitor CSS page just to get a sense of what's being supported right now. So you will unfortunately be doing a lot of this, and your code is going to be super ugly. But fortunately, there are actually CSS tools that there are tools that place your CSS inline for you, which is super helpful. So your code could be nice at first, and then it'll be ugly later. All right, again, so max width. This is a great example of why you need a max width in your email. It starts off pretty good. They've got the logo. That's great. But then the text is just so long, and you just have to like keep turning your head back and forth to read it. So max width, it's generally recommended to keep that within 550 to 600 pixels, and this is just based on most email clients' preview panes. And really quickly, a note about comments. So you're going to have tables all down your page in your emails. So it's a real lifesaver to have comments, so you know where tables begin and where tables end. So like you can see here, I just have a couple of comments letting me know where the wrapper table begins and ends. So comments, awesome. Another thing to keep in mind is having image alternatives within your emails. So some email clients will not display your images. So it's really great to have that alt attribute or possibly a background color, and it's also great for accessibility for people who can't see the images. So it just lets your users know, if an image isn't showing up, at least they know, oh, it's a Hotpads logo. Do I want to see it or don't I? All right, some things that I learned while I was coding my emails. So media queries are really great for readability and targeting certain devices. Note that media queries don't work on all clients. So again, there's another guide here from Style Campaign letting you know which clients will support media queries. So for example, there's this media query here because they do work in Apple. So this is just targeting most mobile Apple devices. Another thing about media queries is that you want to cover all of your bases. So again, since media queries don't work on all devices, you'll want to pair that with a fluid layout. So here I am targeting Apple devices, but for non-Apple devices that are mobile, basically what I want to do is have the width fill out to be 100%. So you'll see the code here. And then another great media query is being able to target Retina or high-res devices. So we just used a general device pixel ratio of 1.5 for all of our Retina to target all of the Retina devices for us. And I'll mention that a little bit later too. All right, another thing, important. When should we use it? Most people say never, but unfortunately in emails, you do need it. So here's a great example of when you'll need important. Sometimes Inline Styles will overwrite your media queries. So you'll see here, I have a height and line height set to 5 pixels in my media query, but then in line I have it set to 10 pixels. And so I just place that important in the media query just to make sure that I have that for any Apple device. All right, this one is a little bit weird. It's going to be hard to see. All right, so this one's a weird line height issue. If you see at the very bottom of the footer image, there's like a thin blue line right at the bottom. And it's like, why is that happening? I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. Well, it turns out that I hadn't set a line height. I hadn't set a line height on the surrounding column element. There we go. And the other thing you can do actually to solve that issue is to set your image to display as blocks so it doesn't interact with the different heights. All right, lastly, some things I learned after the release of my emails. So these were emails that were already going out to our users. One was so mysterious that I can't even find an example of it. It happened within Gmail. And once in a while, an image would turn up with a thin gray border around it. It's like, I didn't set a border on that. Where did that come from? I had no idea what was going on. So it turned out it was really strange. It was a white space issue. So I had to have my image tag in line of my anchor tag, and then that made the border go away. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. But if you guys see gray borders on your images, now you know the solution. Another issue I had was with our high-res images for Retina. You can see here an email that was going out to our users. Obviously, they were scared and confused, so they wrote to us. So the problem was that Outlook 2007, 10, and 13, as well as Outlook and Internet Explorer, don't allow for HTML or CSS image resizing. I was like, So what you have to do for the solution is to replace your image tag by setting a background image on your column element that's containing it, and then set the image to display as none. And I found the solution through Campaign Monitor. So you'll see here very quickly is the code. Above you'll see the CSS, where I'm sitting the high-res background image onto the column element, and then setting the actual regular image to display as none in cases of high-res devices. So again, that media query with DPR 1.5. Another thing I learned is that Outlook 2007, 10, and 13 ignore max width. So what you can do here is set a max width bypass. So what you want to do is set your width to 100% for your background table, and then set a fixed width for any devices that are larger. You may be wondering, Outlook 2007, 10, and 13, WTF? Well, I found out that the rendering engines of Outlook are really crazy. So for 2000 to 2003, they use Internet Explorer, which is like, I guess that's okay. It's like their web browser's not too bad. But then 7, 10, and 13 use Microsoft Word, and you're just like, what were you guys thinking? And then Outlook 2011, yay, Outlook for Mac, it uses WebKit. So it just confuses me, like, why did they go back to Microsoft Word for 2013? I don't know, to make our lives painful. And the last thing that I learned was Gmail actually ignores color styles in the head. So any color styles on anchor tags are ignored, and I actually had to go back through all of our emails and set all of the colors of all of our links in line. All right, very quickly, some resources. There are some really great blogs out there. One is from Style Campaign, which is run by a woman named Anna Yeaman. She's got really great tips and tricks. Litmus is an email testing platform, and they have a great blog as well. Campaign Monitor and MailChimp are online marketing email solutions. So I find a lot of my solutions and a lot of great tidbits there. The pre-made templates that I had mentioned earlier, there are a bunch out there. They're very complicated, but if you're strapped for time, they're really great to take a look at. And lastly, some testing. Email on Acid, Litmus are really great. Unfortunately, they're paid, but they're really amazing. Litmus also has a service called Putsmail, and that allows you to just send emails through their service as well. All right. If you guys have any questions, come find me later. If you want to see some really cool stuff, check out Mixmax. And then my slides are up there. Thank you.